The first thing I heard was gravel popping under tires, slow and steady, coming down a road nobody used unless they had business with us. The second thing I saw was a black utility truck easing past the no trespassing sign like it had been invited. The third thing I noticed was the tow chain in the back, and right then the quiet I had moved out there to find started sounding like a countdown. My name is Mason Reed, and the truck they came for was a faded blue 1998 Chevy K3500 with a cracked bench seat, one stubborn window crank, and enough dents to qualify as a family history. It was not pretty, but neither am I before coffee, and nobody had ever tried to impound me for lowering property values. My wife, Erin, joked that I loved that truck because it never asked where I had been, and I reminded her it had never reorganized the kitchen at midnight. That was the kind of marriage we had. Easy teasing, quiet loyalty. No need to perform for anybody. We had bought 6.5 acres outside a little place called Ashford Hollow, where the county road narrowed into woods and the cell signal gave up around the same time your shoulders finally dropped. The house was small, the barn leaned left, and the grass grew wherever it pleased. To us, that was freedom. To the neighborhood next door, it apparently looked like an emergency. Briar Glen was a polished development of stone mailboxes, clipped hedges, identical porch lights, and homes painted in shades that all seemed to be called coastal fog or responsible oatmeal. Their homeowners association was run by Vivian Cross, a woman with the posture of a headmistress and the smile of someone who had already decided what your apology should sound like. We did not belong to Briar Glen. Our deed was older than the development. Our driveway opened onto a county lane, and the property line sat 30 yards beyond their boundary fence. Erin knew every inch of it. She had spent 12 years working federal protective operations before moving into private security consulting, and she treated paperwork the way some people treat loaded firearms, carefully and always within reach. She was calm in a way that could make an angry room feel embarrassed. I was more of a mutter under my breath, pace around the garage, then think of the right thing to say 2 hours too late kind of man. Vivian came to our porch on the 9th day after we moved in carrying a lemon loaf and a leather folder. Erin invited her inside. Vivian stayed standing, looked past us toward the Chevy, and sighed like she'd found a dead fly in church. She said, "I wanted to welcome you and make sure you understand the visual standards expected in this community." Erin glanced at me, already fighting a smile. I said, "The Woods have not filed a complaint yet." Vivian opened the folder and handed me a glossy booklet with the Briar Glen crest on the front. Oversized trucks and visibly distressed automobiles must be stored out of sight. I looked at my Chevy, then back at her. That truck is not distressed. It has character. It affects the view from several homes, she said. So does the sunrise, I told her, and nobody asked it to move. That was the first time I saw the real Vivian, the small flash beneath the polished voice when the world refused to arrange itself around her. Erin stepped in before I could turn one bad joke into a county incident. She explained that our land was outside the association, that the covenanters did not apply, and that we would not be changing anything. Vivian closed the folder slowly. People often discover that being technically correct does not make them good neighbors. Then she left the lemon loaf on the rail and walked away. I ate 2 slices that night and told Erin Spite tasted surprisingly citrusy. 3 days later, a notice appeared under our windshield wiper demanding vehicle compliance within 72 hours. It carried a county emblem, a citation number, and language about nuisance abatement. Erin held it toward the light. "Wrong font, wrong department name, dretched seal," she said. "It is fake." Then another notice came, followed by emails from something called Briar Glen Community Enforcement. They accused us of hazardous equipment, visual blight, and possible environmental leakage. The Chevy leaked nothing except dignity when the heater fan squealed. The facts were not what Vivian was collecting. She was building a story, one where we looked reckless and temporary, because if enough people believed it, she could treat our rights like a clerical mistake. Erin saved everything, photographed the envelopes, checked the email headers, and called the county code office. A clerk confirmed there was no case against us. I wanted to drive to Vivian's house and return every fake notice to her mail slot, one crumpled ball at a time. Erin said that would feel good for 6 minutes and look terrible forever. So we waited, watched, and kept the cameras running. For a week, nothing happened. Then on a cold Tuesday morning, while Erin was out on the back trail and I was replacing a rusted barn hinge, That black utility truck rolled down a private lane with 4 men inside. They parked across the driveway, climbed out wearing gray shirts marked Briar Glen Property Response, and one of them lowered the tow rig like he had done it before. Their leader was thick through the shoulders, with mirrored sunglasses and a radio on his collar. He walked straight toward me, held up a laminated card, and said, "Step away from the vehicle. We are seizing it under Community Nuisance Authority." I looked at the fake badge, then at the chain sliding toward my truck, and realized Vivian had finally stopped pretending this was about appearances. I set the barn hinge down and walked toward him slowly, not because I was afraid, though I would be lying if I said my pulse was normal, but because men like that feed on sudden movement, confusion, anything they can later describe as resistance. "You're standing on private property," I said, "and that truck belongs to me." He smiled without warmth. "Sir, you have been notified multiple times by people with access to a printer." One of the men snorted, but the leader did not. He lifted the laminated card closer to my face. The thing had a silver shield printed on it, his picture, and the title, Senior Compliance Marshal, which sounded like something invented during a slow afternoon at a coffee shop. "This is your final warning. Interference may result in detention." That word changed the air. Up until then, part of me still wanted to believe this was theater. A few overgrown hall monitors trying to scare the country neighbor into hiding his ugly truck. But they had brought restraints. I could see black zip ties clipped to 2 belts, a collapsible baton on another, and a canister that looked an awful lot like pepper spray. The man by the tow rig was already feeding a chain under my front axle. I reached for my phone. The leader stepped sideways and blocked me, hands where I can see them. "You are not law enforcement. We are authorized by the community. The community does not own me." His jaw tightened. Behind him, the chain scraped across gravel, a dry metallic sound that made something in me go cold. That truck had belonged to my father before me. He bought it used after 26 years at the paper mill, drove it until his knees could not handle the clutch, then handed me the keys on a rainy Sunday and said, "Take care of her, and she will take care of you." He died 6 months later. Vivian could call it visual blight all she wanted. To me, it was the last machine on earth that still carried the shape of his hands. I stepped around the leader. He grabbed my forearm. That was the moment everything stopped being ridiculous. I looked down at his hand, then back at his face. "Let go. You are being detained for obstruction." He said it loudly, like volume could turn fiction into law. I heard footsteps behind me, quick and steady, coming off the trail. Erin appeared at the edge of the driveway in black running pants and a gray sweatshirt, her hair tied back, cheeks red from the cold. She took in the scene in one sweep. The tow truck, the uniforms, the hand on my arm, the restraints, and the chain under the Chevy. Her expression did not change much, but I knew her well enough to see the door close behind her eyes. "Remove your hand from my husband," she said. The leader turned. "Ma'am, stay back. This is an authorized vehicle seizure." Erin kept walking. "By which agency?" "Briar Glen Property Response." "That is not an agency. We have community authority. That is not legal authority." He released me and faced her, probably because he had decided I was the loud one and she was the easier problem. Men like him often confuse a calm woman with a harmless one. "Ma'am, if you interfere, you may also be detained." Erin stopped 6 feet away. "Name and licensing number." He blinked. "Excuse me, your name, your employer, your state security license, and the statute you believe permits you to detain private citizens outside HOA jurisdiction." The other men started looking at each other. The one near the tow rig froze with the chain in his hands. The leader raised his chin. "You need to step back. You need to answer. This is official business." "No. This is criminal impersonation with matching shirts." There was no anger in her voice, which somehow made it sharper. She pointed to the camera above the garage. "You are being recorded with audio. Your vehicle plate is visible. Your faces are visible. The moment you touched him, this became assault. The moment you attached that chain, it became attempted theft." The leader glanced toward the camera, and for the first time I saw uncertainty flicker across his face. Then his radio crackled. A woman's voice came through, clipped and impatient. "Dane, proceed. Do not let them delay you again." Erin and I looked at each other. We both recognized Vivian. The leader, whose name was apparently Dane, reached for the radio, but Erin said, "Do not touch it. That transmission is evidence. That was when he made the mistake that ended his career, assuming he ever had one. He reached for the baton on his belt. Erin moved before I understood what he was doing. She caught his wrist, turned her body, and used his forward momentum to drive him face down onto the gravel. It happened so cleanly that for half a second the rest of us just watched. Dane grunted, his sunglasses skidding under the Chevy. Erin pinned his arm behind him and removed the baton with a free hand. "Do not move," she said. One of the others rushed toward her. I grabbed a long-handled shovel from beside the barn, not to swing it, just to make it clear the math was changing. "Think real hard," I told him. He stopped. Erin stripped the pepper spray, radio, and zip ties from Dane's belt, then secured his wrists behind his back. "Call the sheriff," she said to me. Already doing it, the man by the tow rig dropped the chain and raised both hands. Another started backing toward their truck. Erin pointed at him. "Stay where you are. You are all part of an attempted unlawful seizure. If you leave, the plate, video, and your employer records will still identify you. But fleeing will make the explanation worse." He stopped too. There is a particular kind of silence that comes when bravado realizes it has no backup. A minute earlier, those men had filled the driveway with orders. Now all I could hear was Dane breathing hard into the gravel and the faint tick of the Chevy's cooling engine. The sheriff's dispatcher kept me on the line while Erin directed the men to sit near the fence with their hands visible. She did not tie the others, because they were complying, but she collected their batons and sprays and placed everything on the hood of the black utility truck. Then she photographed the laminated badges, the tow authorization form, and a clipboard containing a list of addresses. Our address was highlighted in yellow. So were 9 others, all properties along the outer edge of Briar Glen. Beside each address was a note: uncooperative, non-conforming vehicle, political signage, rental suspicion, elderly resistance. Erin read those words twice. "This is not about your truck," she said quietly. "It is a target list." The deputies arrived with lights flashing but no sirens. Sheriff Tom Bellamy came himself, a broad, older man who had helped us pull a fallen pine off the county road the previous winter. He stepped out, surveyed Dane on the ground, the seated men, the weapons lined up on the hood, then looked at Erin. "I take it there is a story. There is video," she said. "Even better." Dane began talking immediately, claiming we had attacked an authorized neighborhood safety unit. Sheriff Bellamy listened without interrupting, then examined the badge. He turned it over in his hand and said, "This barcode goes to a discount uniform website." One of the younger deputies coughed to hide a laugh. Bellamy asked for their licenses. None had one. He asked for a court order authorizing seizure. They produced a document stamped with the county seal. The sheriff studied it, then handed it to his deputy. "Call the clerk." The answer came back in less than 3 minutes. The case number belonged to a zoning dispute from 8 years earlier. The signature belonged to a judge who had retired before Briar Glen was even built. Bellamy looked at Dane. "You boys have managed to turn a bad idea into several felonies before breakfast." He ordered all 4 men handcuffed. Dane's face changed when the cuffs clicked, the anger draining out and leaving something smaller behind. "We were hired," he said. "We were told it was legal." "By whom?" Bellamy asked. Dane looked at the radio lying on the hood. Nobody needed him to answer. The deputies searched their truck and found more restraints, blank citation forms, printed county seals, a handheld scanner, and folders on residents who had challenged HOA decisions. They also found envelopes of cash labeled by date. Each envelope carried the initials VC. Erin stood beside me while the evidence bags multiplied. I thought I would feel triumphant, but mostly I felt sick. This had been planned. Somebody had sat in a clean office under soft lighting and discussed how to frighten people into obedience. Somebody had printed our address, circled our truck, and decided 4 men with weapons would be cheaper than admitting they had no authority. Sheriff Bellamy asked us to come to the station later to provide statements. Before he left, he lowered his voice. "Lock your gate tonight. People who build little kingdoms do not react well when the walls start coming down." By noon, the arrests were all over town. By 3, a local reporter was parked outside Briar Glen. By 5, Vivian Cross had issued a statement claiming the men were independent contractors who had exceeded their instructions. Erin read it at the kitchen table, then slid her laptop toward me. On the screen was an email recovered from one of the seized phones. It was from Vivian, sent at 6014 that morning. The subject line read, "Nolan Vehicle Removal." The final sentence was short enough to fit on one line. If they resist, restrain them and make an example. That sentence changed the whole shape of the case, because it meant Vivian had not lost control of some overzealous contractors. She had given them permission to use fear as a tool. And once Sheriff Bellamy saw it, the investigation stopped being about one old truck and started reaching into every locked drawer in Briar Glen. The county attorney subpoenaed the HOA records, the company accounts, the security contracts, and every internal email connected to Vivian Cross. And for the next few weeks, our kitchen table looked like the command center of a small war nobody in Ashford Hollow had known was happening. Erin worked through documents late into the night, not because anyone asked her to, but because she had that rare kind of patience that makes dishonest people nervous. She found payments routed through a company called Meridian Neighborhood Solutions, which sounded respectable until you learned it was registered to Vivian's brother-in-law and operated from a mailbox behind a dry cleaner. HOA dues had paid for uniforms, fake badges, surveillance equipment, towel straps, radios, and what the invoices called behavioral compliance services. I asked Erin what that meant. She stared at the screen and said, "It means intimidation was billable." The target list found in the utility truck turned out to be only one page from a much larger file. There were photographs of residents taking out trash, notes about who attended board meetings, copies of social media posts, vehicle descriptions, work schedules, and little comments beside names like likely to fold, financially vulnerable, isolated, or needs pressure. One elderly widower named Harold Price had paid $3,000 in fines after men in gray shirts threatened to condemn his porch. A single mother named Tessa Morgan had moved out after being followed and photographed because Vivian suspected she was renting a room without approval. A retired teacher had stopped displaying a veteran's flag after receiving anonymous warnings that his house would be inspected every week until he cooperated. Once those people realized Erin and I had evidence, they started calling. At first, the conversations were cautious, almost embarrassed, because fear makes decent people feel ashamed of what was done to them. Then the stories came faster. One neighbor brought us a box of letters. Another handed over a recording of Vivian saying, "Rules only work when people believe resistance costs more than obedience." That line ended up on the evening news. Vivian responded the way people like her always seem to respond when the truth gets loud. She called herself the victim. She stood outside the Briar Glen clubhouse in a cream suit, surrounded by supporters, and told reporters that Erin had assaulted community volunteers and that I had created a hostile environment with my truck, my gravel drive, and my refusal to participate in neighborhood harmony. Watching her blame a 28-year-old pickup for organized intimidation would have been funny if we had not been sleeping with exterior lights on and a baseball bat beside the bedroom door. The harassment got worse before it got better. Somebody poured nails across our lane. Our mailbox was smashed. A drone hovered outside our upstairs window one night until Erin tracked where it landed and gave the coordinates to Bellamy. Then, at 4:12 on a Sunday morning, a white pickup crashed through our wooden gate, accelerated across the yard, and slammed into the front of my Chevy hard enough to shove it sideways. I woke to metal screaming and glass breaking. By the time I reached the porch, the white truck was reversing, its rear bumper hanging loose, and I could see a man in a Briar Glen jacket behind the wheel. He threw something from the window before speeding away. It was a folded note that said, "Go back where you belong." I stood in the cold staring at the Chevy, its grille crushed, one headlight hanging by a wire, and for the first time since all of this started, I wanted to hurt somebody. Not argue, not document, not wait for a court. I wanted to find the man who had done it and make him understand what that truck meant. Erin came up behind me, put one hand on my shoulder, and said, "Mason, look at me." I did not want to. Look at me. When I finally turned, she was holding her phone with the security footage already saved. "They want you angry," she said. "They need you angry, because evidence is beating them." I wish I could say those words calmed me immediately, but they did not. They just gave me something stronger than rage to hold on to. The camera had captured the plate. The driver was arrested that afternoon, and under questioning, he admitted Vivian had promised to cover his legal expenses and erase 6 months of unpaid HOA dues if he scared us into moving. That confession broke the last wall. Board members began cooperating. One turned over deleted meeting recordings. Another admitted Vivian had created the enforcement unit after learning that several parcels outside Briar Glen might be valuable for a future expansion road. Our land sat directly across the route she wanted. The ugly truck had never been the real problem. It was the excuse. If she could label us difficult, unsafe, and non-compliant, she believed she could pressure us into selling cheaply, then present the purchase as a victory for property values. Suddenly, every fake citation, every threat, and every late-night visitor had a motive that made terrible sense. Vivian had not been protecting a neighborhood. She had been preparing a land deal. The county charged her with conspiracy, fraud, criminal impersonation, attempted coercion, and misuse of association funds. Meridian Neighborhood Solutions collapsed within days. Dane and two of the other men accepted plea agreements and testified about the instructions they had received. The HOA's insurance company refused to defend several board members after discovering the forged documents, and the residents themselves voted to remove the entire leadership in a meeting so crowded people stood outside in the rain listening through open windows. Erin and I sat in the back row. Vivian entered late with an attorney and tried to take her usual seat at the front. Nobody moved for her. That may have been the first moment she understood she was no longer in charge. The legal settlement came months later. The HOA paid restitution to the residents it had targeted, dissolved the private enforcement program, opened its finances to independent audits, and signed a permanent agreement acknowledging it had no jurisdiction over our property. We received enough money to repair the gate, install better cameras, and restore the Chevy. I kept the crushed grill mounted on the barn wall, not as a trophy, but as a reminder of how quickly polite control can turn into violence when somebody refuses to obey. Vivian avoided prison through a negotiated plea, which still divides people around here. She received probation, home confinement, financial penalties, and a permanent ban from serving on any association board. Some neighbors say that was justice because her power was destroyed and the victims were compensated. Others say a person who organizes armed intimidation and sends someone to ram a house deserves a cell, not an ankle monitor. I am still not sure where I land. I know revenge and justice are not the same thing, but I also know consequences teach best when they are impossible to ignore. These days the Chevy runs again. The hood is a slightly different shade of blue. The front bumper sits a little crooked, and the passenger window still needs encouragement when it is cold. Every Sunday, Erin and I drive it to the farmer's market, and people from Briar Glen wave as we pass. Some look embarrassed, some look grateful, a few still look away. The quiet has returned to our woods, but it does not feel innocent anymore. I understand now that silence can mean peace, or it can mean people are too frightened to speak, and the difference is whether someone is willing to turn on a camera, keep the receipts, and ask who gave the order. So tell me honestly, if 4 fake officers showed up to take something that belonged to you, would you stand your ground? Call the sheriff, or let them leave just to protect your family from what might come next? Was Vivian a criminal who escaped real punishment? Or did losing her reputation, money, and authority fit the damage she caused? Leave your judgment in the comments. Share this story with someone who has ever been bullied by a board, a committee, or a person hiding behind a title. And subscribe if you believe communities are safest when ordinary people are brave enough to question the ones claiming to protect them.